The first warning wasn't the zero in my bank account. It was the way the cashier looked at me after my card declined. Not irritated. Not impatient. Sorry. As though the machine had told her something about my life before I was ready to hear it. I had spent 30 years building a retirement that would never make me wealthy, but would let me grow old without becoming anyone's burden. By noon that day, every dollar was gone. By 3, I knew my son had taken it. And by 7 that evening, I was standing inside the luxury penthouse he had bought with my money, listening as he raised a glass to his beautiful new life. When I asked him why he had done it, he leaned close enough for me to smell champagne on his breath. Then he smiled. "You're getting confused, Mom. Maybe it's time we found you a home." The room went very quiet. My son thought he was looking at a frightened old woman with nowhere left to go. He had no idea I still held the deed to the building beneath his feet. The grocery store was almost empty that Tuesday morning. A floor cleaning machine hummed near the frozen food aisle, leaving a wet shine behind it. Somewhere above me, an old song played through the speakers, soft enough that I could hear the wheels of my cart squeaking every few steps. I remember ordinary details from that morning with painful clarity. A carton of eggs. 2 cans of tomato soup. A small bag of coffee I almost put back because the price had gone up again. That was how I had lived since retiring. Not fearfully. Carefully. There is a difference. I had worked for the county transportation department for 32 years, most of them in payroll and financial compliance. I was the woman people called when figures didn't match, when invoices disappeared, or when somebody tried to hide a mistake beneath a stack of paperwork. I knew how money moved. I knew how easily people lied about it. What I didn't know was that my own son had been studying my habits more closely than I had been studying his. The cashier scanned the coffee last. "That'll be $46.20, she said. I inserted my debit card. The machine beeped. Declined. I frowned and tried again. Same result. The cashier glanced toward the woman waiting behind me. "Sometimes the chip acts up," she said gently. "It was working yesterday." I wiped the card against my sleeve, although I knew that wouldn't make any difference. I tried my second card. Another beep. Another rejection. The woman behind me shifted her basket to the other arm. She wasn't rude, but I felt her watching. That small awareness made heat crawl up my neck. "I'll just pay cash." I opened my wallet. There were 2 $20 bills inside. Not enough. I began removing things from the counter. First the coffee. Then the soup. "Ma'am," the cashier said, lowering her voice. "You can take the groceries. I'll cover the rest." "No." The word came out more sharply than I intended. She blinked. I softened my tone. "Thank you. But no." Pride can look foolish from the outside. From the inside, it can be the last solid thing you're standing on. I bought the eggs, bread, and a carton of milk. Then I pushed the nearly empty cart toward the doors while the rain tapped against the glass outside. My hands had begun to shake. Not because I thought I was poor. Because I knew I wasn't. At least, I hadn't been when I went to sleep. I sat inside my car with the grocery bag on the passenger seat and called the number on the back of my card. The automated voice asked me to enter my account number. Then my date of birth. Then the last 4 digits of my social security number. After 3 minutes of recorded music, a young man answered. "Mrs. Hale, thank you for verifying your identity. How may I assist you?" "My cards have been declined." "I'm sorry to hear that. Let me review the account." I heard typing. A pause. More typing. Then nothing. The silence changed. People who have worked around money learn to recognize that kind of silence. It is the sound someone makes when the numbers are worse than expected. Mrs. Hale, he said carefully, I'm going to transfer you to our account security department. Why? They'll be able to explain the recent activity more completely. What recent activity? Another pause. I'm transferring you now. The music returned. This time, I didn't hear it as music. I heard it as distance. The distance between my life that morning and whatever was waiting on the other side of the call. A woman from security came on the line. Her voice was professional but guarded. She asked whether I had recently authorized a large transfer. How large? I'm not able to discuss the details until we complete enhanced verification. You already verified me. For this transaction, we need additional confirmation. Then confirm me. She asked questions about my mortgage, my former employer, and a car loan I had paid off 12 years earlier. I answered every one. Finally, she said, the transfer was completed 4 business days ago. My fingers tightened around the phone. How much? $312,418. For a moment, the rain disappeared. The parking lot disappeared. Even the sound of my own breathing seemed to move far away. That money was not an abstract figure. It was every early shift I had worked while Daniel was still asleep. Every lunch I had packed instead of buying one. Every vacation I had postponed. Every winter I had turned the thermostat down and told myself a sweater was just as comfortable. It was the sum of small sacrifices no one had noticed because I had made them quietly. Where did it go? I asked. The funds were transferred to an escrow account connected to a real estate purchase. I didn't buy any real estate. The request was submitted by your authorized representative. I don't have an authorized representative. The woman's voice became even more cautious. Our records show a financial power of attorney assigned to Daniel Hale. My son's name landed harder than the amount. I looked through the rain-streaked windshield. A man was loading groceries into the back of an SUV. A little girl in a yellow coat jumped over a puddle while her mother held out an umbrella. The world continued without noticing that mine had split open. Daniel does not have power of attorney, I said. Our documents indicate that he does. No. Years ago, I gave him temporary authority while I was recovering from hip surgery. It expired after 90 days. I can't assess the validity of the document, Mrs. Hale. But the request included medical certification stating that you were no longer capable of managing your financial affairs. I stopped breathing. What medical certification? A letter declaring cognitive incapacity. From whom? I'm afraid I can't provide more information by telephone. You'll need to visit a branch and speak with a manager. I am not incapacitated. I understand. No, you don't. The words rose before I could control them. I drove myself here. I answered every security question you asked. I know exactly what day it is. I know exactly how much was in my account last Friday. I am not confused. I believe you, Mrs. Hale. Her voice softened. That almost made it worse. People speak softly when they think a person is fragile. I need you to freeze everything, I said. We've placed restrictions on the remaining accounts. Remaining? Another pause. There is a balance of $38.16. The bank manager's office smelled of carpet cleaner and peppermint. His name was Mr. Lawson. He was perhaps 45, with a navy tie and the careful expression of a man who had already spoken to the legal department before inviting me inside. He closed the glass door behind us. On his desk sat a thin folder. My life, reduced to half an inch of paper. Mrs. Hale, I want to begin by saying we're treating this very seriously. Open the folder. He hesitated. Please sit down. I'll sit after I've seen what my son gave you. He opened the file. The first page was a copy of a power of attorney document bearing my name. The signature looked convincing. That was the disturbing part. It wasn't perfect, but Daniel had seen me sign birthday cards, school forms, checks, tax documents, and permission slips his entire life. He knew the long curve of the M. He knew the way I crossed the H in Hale after lifting the pen. There was even a faint tremor in the last letters, as though the person signing had an unsteady hand. A performance of old age. My son hadn't merely forged my name. He had forged the weakness he wanted people to see in me. This isn't my signature, I said. Mr. Lawson nodded once. We'll send it to our fraud department. The second page was a letter from a medical clinic I had never visited. It stated that I suffered from progressive cognitive impairment and was unable to make complex financial decisions. The language was vague. Intentionally vague. No diagnosis. No test results. Just enough official wording to make a busy employee stop asking questions. Did anyone call me? I asked. Our records show that a verification call was placed. I never received one. The call was answered. By whom? We don't know. I thought of the previous week. 3 missed calls from an unknown number. Daniel had been at my house that afternoon. He had arrived carrying soup and insisting that I lie down because I looked tired. While I was upstairs changing, my phone had been on the kitchen counter. The memory rearranged itself in my mind. Not a loving visit. Access. Timing. Observation. He hadn't come to check on me. He had come to make sure I didn't answer. Where was the money sent? I asked. Mr. Lawson slid a transaction summary toward me. The escrow company's name appeared at the top. Underneath it was the property description. The Beaumont Residences. Penthouse 31A. Purchase price, $1.86 million. My money had not paid for the entire property. It had been used as the down payment. The buyer was listed as Daniel Hale. Beside his name was another. Claire Whitmore. I read it twice. Who is Claire Whitmore? Mr. Lawson looked uncomfortable. I couldn't say. She's on the purchase agreement. Yes. And my retirement money paid their deposit. It appears so. I pressed both palms against the edge of his desk. I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked for copies. Every page. Every transfer. Every recorded authorization. My years in compliance had taught me something anger never could. When people betray you, your first instinct is to demand an explanation. But explanations are stories. Documents are evidence. Daniel had called me 3 days earlier. I remembered the conversation while I drove home. He had sounded distracted. Mom, what are you doing Saturday? Probably gardening. Why? Claire and I are having a small engagement gathering. Claire? He laughed as if I had missed a joke. My fiancé. I had pulled the phone away from my ear to make sure I had called the right person. You're what? I was going to tell you. When? I'm telling you now. I had asked how long they had known each other. 6 months. I asked why I had never met her. He said things had been busy. Then, almost as an afterthought, he invited me to the party. Saturday evening. The Beaumont Residences. Penthouse 31A. At the time, I had felt hurt that my only child had become engaged without telling me. Now I understood. He had not forgotten to tell me. He had been waiting until the money cleared. My house felt different when I returned. Not unsafe. Violated. Daniel's fingerprints seemed to exist everywhere. On the kitchen drawer where I kept old financial documents. On the small desk near the window. On the cabinet containing my medication. I placed the grocery bag on the counter and walked from room to room, noticing what had moved. The framed photograph from my hip surgery was slightly crooked. The lower desk drawer didn't close properly. Inside, the folder containing my expired power of attorney paperwork sat at an angle. I lifted it out. The original was still there. Daniel had photographed it. Maybe scanned it. Then created a new version with altered dates. There was a time when I would have defended him before anyone even accused him. Daniel had not been an easy child, but he had been mine. When his father left, Daniel was 9. He stopped sleeping through the night. He began getting into fights at school. For almost a year, he refused to eat anything except toast with the crust removed. I worked all day and sat beside his bed each night until he fell asleep. When he failed his first semester of college, I didn't scold him. I drove 3 hours, packed his dorm room, and told him a wrong turn was not the same as a ruined life. When his first business collapsed, I covered 2 months of his rent. When his second collapsed, I stopped asking how much he needed and simply sent what I could. Perhaps that was where I had failed him. Not by loving him. By making rescue look effortless. Children do not always understand sacrifice when they never see the wound it leaves behind. My phone rang. Daniel. I stared at his name until the call nearly ended. Then I answered. Hi, Mom. He sounded cheerful. Relaxed. As though my money were not currently holding up the roof over his head. Are you home? He asked. Yes. Good. Listen, Saturday's gotten a little bigger than expected. Claire's family invited some people from her father's company. So, dress nicely. I looked at the forged signature on my kitchen table. How nicely. You know. Elegant. Do I embarrass you, Daniel? He laughed, but too quickly. What? No. Where did that come from? I was curious. You always look fine. Fine. The word men use when they don't want to admit they've judged you. Should I bring anything? I asked. No. Everything's handled. With whose money? Silence. It lasted less than 2 seconds. But I heard the change in his breathing. What does that mean? Exactly what I asked. Mom, I'm in the middle of something. Then I won't keep you. Wait. Are you okay? It was almost convincing. Almost. Perfectly, I said. Then I ended the call. I did not contact the police that afternoon. Some people may find that difficult to understand. But betrayal by a stranger is simple. Betrayal by your child enters through every memory you share with them. Calling the police would mean saying the words aloud. My son forged my signature. My son declared me mentally unfit. My son emptied my retirement account. Once spoken, those facts would no longer belong only to me. They would become forms, interviews, evidence bags, case numbers. I needed one night before grief became procedure. So I did what I had done throughout my working life. I built a file. I printed bank statements. I highlighted transfers. I wrote down the dates of Daniel's recent visits. I saved his messages. At 10 that night, I found something else. 2 weeks earlier, Daniel had texted asking for a photograph of my driver's license. He said the family insurance company needed it to update an emergency contact. I had sent it without hesitation. I sat alone at the kitchen table, reading that message until the screen dimmed. Then I whispered the question I had been avoiding. How long have you been planning this? The refrigerator motor clicked off. The house became completely silent. Saturday arrived bright and cold. I spent the morning in my garden. The tomato plants needed tying back, though the season was nearly over. Working with my hands helped me separate pain from decision. By 4, I showered and dressed. I chose a dark blue suit I had worn to my retirement dinner. It was well cut, modest, and slightly tighter around the waist than I remembered. I pinned my silver hair neatly at the back of my neck. Then I opened the small wooden box on my dresser. Inside was a pearl brooch my mother had given me. I almost wore it. Instead, I closed the box. Pearls belonged to celebrations. I was going to an investigation. The Beaumont stood in the wealthiest part of the city, a tower of glass and pale stone rising above the river. Valets in charcoal coats opened car doors beneath a wide brass canopy. Light spilled from the lobby onto the pavement. I parked across the street. For several minutes, I watched expensive cars arrive. People stepped out laughing, carrying wrapped gifts and bottles of champagne. Daniel had described the gathering as small. There were at least 70 guests. As I crossed the street, I looked up at the building. Near the entrance, a polished plaque reflected the evening lights. The Beaumont Residences. Underneath, in smaller letters. Managed by Hawthorne Residential Holdings. The name caught somewhere in my memory. Hawthorne. I knew it. Not well enough to understand why. But well enough to stop walking. A valet stepped toward me. Ma'am? I looked away from the plaque. I'm here for the engagement party. Penthouse? Yes. His smile became brighter. Right this way. The elevator rose so smoothly that I barely felt it moving. A young couple stood beside me, whispering about the view. The woman held a white gift bag with gold lettering. The man was checking his reflection in the mirrored wall. You know Daniel well? He asked me casually. I thought I did. He laughed, assuming I had made a joke. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse. Music, conversation, and warm light rushed toward us. The living room was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. White orchids stood on black marble tables. A waiter moved through the crowd carrying glasses of champagne. Across the room, a string quartet played near a staircase that curved toward a private rooftop terrace. $312,000. I could see it everywhere. In the imported flowers. In the crystal. In the champagne bottles resting in silver buckets. In the cream-colored furniture no sensible person would buy if they had ever raised a child. Then I saw Daniel. He stood near the windows in a tailored tuxedo, one hand resting against the waist of a tall blonde woman in a silver dress. Claire. She was beautiful in a precise, expensive way. Every strand of hair in place. Every movement designed to be noticed without appearing to ask for attention. Daniel saw me. For a moment, his smile disappeared. Then he recovered and crossed the room. Mom. You came. You invited me. He kissed the air beside my cheek. His eyes moved over my suit. You look nice. Fine? He stared at me. What? Nothing. Claire joined us, extending both hands as though greeting a donor at a charity event. You must be Margaret. Her smile was warm. Her eyes were not unkind. That surprised me. I'm so happy to finally meet you. Finally, I repeated. Daniel glanced toward a group of guests behind us. Claire, your father's looking for you. He can wait. She touched my sleeve. Daniel has told me so much about you. Has he? He said you were the reason he learned to be ambitious. Daniel looked down at his drink. I watched him avoid my eyes. What else did he tell you? I asked. Claire laughed softly. That you're very independent. He worries about you living alone, but I told him women like you don't like being fussed over. Women like me? Strong women. The phrase seemed sincere. That made what came next more painful. Claire turned toward the room and gestured proudly. Can you believe this place? Daniel surprised me with it. Did he? He closed on it this week. I told him it was too much, but he said we should start our marriage somewhere that reflects what we're building. I looked at my son. What are you building, Daniel? His jaw tightened. A future. With what? Claire's smile faded slightly. Daniel touched my elbow. Mom, can I speak to you? He guided me toward a hallway before I answered. His hand looked gentle to anyone watching. His fingers were pressing hard enough to hurt. We stopped near a guest bedroom. The sounds of the party became muffled behind the closed hallway door. Daniel released my arm. What are you doing? I came to celebrate. Don't do that. Do what? Talk like that. Like every word has another meaning. Perhaps every word does. He rubbed his forehead. Did you take your medication today? There it was. A small sentence. Carefully chosen. Spoken loudly enough that a passing waiter could hear. I watched the waiter's eyes flick toward me before he continued walking. Daniel was already building the story. Confused mother. Concerned son. A tragic private decline. Which medication? I asked. He lowered his voice. Whatever the doctor gave you. You told the bank I have dementia. The color drained from his face. Not completely. Just enough. I don't know what you're talking about. I've seen the documents. His eyes moved toward the living room. Not here. Why? Are you afraid your guests will hear how you bought the penthouse? Keep your voice down. My voice is down. Mom. You forged my signature. He looked at me for several seconds. Then something in him changed. The frightened son disappeared. In his place stood a man who had decided denial was no longer useful. You weren't using the money. I felt the sentence more than I heard it. I was living on it. No. You were staring at it. It was my retirement. You have a house. I have bills. You own things you don't even understand. And that gave you permission? I was going to pay it back. With what? He looked away. That was the answer. There was no plan to repay it. Only the belief that I would die before demanding it. I felt a pressure behind my ribs, deep and physical. But my voice remained steady. Who wrote the medical letter? Mom, please. Was it a real doctor? You're making this uglier than it needs to be. I bought groceries with $40 this week because you left me $38 in the bank. He exhaled sharply. You always do that. Do what? Make yourself the victim. For a second, I could only stare at him. He continued before I could answer. You've spent my whole life reminding me what you gave up. The jobs. The money. Dad leaving. Every time I needed help, you made it feel like another entry in some ledger. I never said that. You didn't have to. The door to the living room opened. A burst of laughter and music entered the hallway. Claire appeared. Everything all right? Daniel's expression changed instantly. Concern softened his face. Mom's overwhelmed. I watched him perform kindness. It was chilling how naturally it came. Claire looked at me. Would you like somewhere quiet to sit? I'd like to know whether you understand how this apartment was purchased. Daniel stepped between us. Enough. Claire frowned. What does that mean? It means, I said, looking directly at her, the money used for this penthouse did not belong to Daniel. His voice sharpened. Mom. It belonged to me. The music continued in the other room. A violin rising above the sound of conversation. Claire's eyes moved from me to Daniel. What is she talking about? Daniel gave a small, embarrassed laugh. She's been having memory issues. The cruelty of it was not in the lie. It was in how prepared he was to use it. He reached for my shoulder. I stepped back before he could touch me. Tell her, I said. Tell her you forged a legal document. Tell her you had someone declare me incompetent. Tell her you emptied my account 4 days before closing on this apartment. Claire's face changed. Not disbelief. Calculation. She was looking at Daniel differently now. Measuring him. Daniel saw it too. His fear became anger. You need to leave. I'm your mother. And this is my home. Purchased with my money. You're causing a scene. No. A scene has witnesses. I opened the hallway door. The party continued beyond it, bright and elegant. Shall we find some? He grabbed the door and pushed it closed again. For the first time that evening, his composure cracked. What do you want? My money returned. I can't do that tonight. Then admit what you did. You don't understand how complicated this is. I understand the transfer perfectly. You've had a comfortable life, he whispered. You have your house. You have Social Security. You don't need $300,000 sitting in an account. It was not yours to decide what I needed. I'm your son. That should have stopped you. The words hit him. For half a second, I saw the child he had been. The boy who used to wait at the window for me to come home. Then the softness vanished. He glanced at Claire, at the closed door, at the life he was afraid I would expose. His face hardened. You know what? Maybe the bank was right to accept those documents. Claire whispered his name. He ignored her. You forget things. You repeat yourself. You live alone in that house, hoarding paperwork and worrying about every dollar. I worked for every dollar. And now you're too old to do anything with it. The hallway seemed to narrow around us. Claire stared at him. Daniel took a step closer. His voice became quiet. Almost intimate. Go home, Mom. Before you embarrass yourself. I held his gaze. He wanted tears. An outburst. Anything he could point to as proof that I was unstable. I gave him nothing. That unsettled him more. Then he said the sentence that ended whatever remained between us. Maybe it's time we found you a home. Not my home. A home. A place where people send inconvenient mothers after taking control of their money. Claire looked down. Daniel waited for me to break. Instead, I straightened the cuff of my jacket. When you were 8, I said, you broke the kitchen window and blamed the neighbor's boy. His brow tightened. What? I knew you were lying because you never looked at the broken glass. You kept watching my face to see whether I believed you. I don't know what this has to do with. You're doing it again. For the first time, he looked uncertain. I opened the hallway door. The party noise surrounded us. Guests turned as I walked through the living room. Not because I was causing a scene. Because silence has a way of drawing more attention than shouting. I stopped beside the elevator and looked back. Daniel stood beneath a chandelier paid for with my money, beside a woman who no longer seemed certain she knew him. He had everything he thought he wanted. But his eyes were following me. Still checking my face. Still trying to determine what I knew. The elevator doors closed between us. Outside, cold air struck my cheeks. I crossed beneath the brass canopy and paused beside the management plaque. Hawthorne Residential Holdings. There was that feeling again. A name pulled from another life. I took a photograph of it. Then I drove home. It was after midnight when I remembered. Not all at once. First, I remembered my late father mentioning Hawthorne at the dinner table. Then I remembered a lawyer's office. A stack of property papers. A signature I had placed beneath my married name almost 25 years earlier. I went into the spare room and pulled a metal file box from the back of the closet. Dust coated the lid. Inside were old tax returns, insurance policies, and documents from investments I had stopped thinking about long ago. At the bottom was a thick cream-colored envelope. The paper had yellowed around the edges. Across the front, in my father's handwriting, were 5 words. Margaret, do not sell this. My pulse slowed. I carried the envelope to the kitchen table. Inside was a corporate ownership certificate. Several property schedules. And a deed bearing the name of the same company printed beneath Daniel's new address. Hawthorne Residential Holdings. I read the first page. Then the second. By the third, I understood why the building's name had felt familiar. Daniel had taken my retirement savings to buy a penthouse. But the building beneath that penthouse had been part of a family investment structure for decades. An investment Daniel believed I had sold years ago. I turned to the final ownership schedule. My name appeared beside the controlling interest. 51%. For the first time since the grocery store, my hand stopped shaking. My son had told me to find somewhere else to live. He had forgotten who owned his home. Before I tell you what I did with that discovery, take a moment and ask yourself one question. If the person who betrayed you was your own child, would you still protect them from the consequences? Or would you finally let them meet the woman they had mistaken for weak? Because on Monday morning, I wasn't going to the police. Not yet. I was going to a lawyer. And I was taking the deed with me. I arrived at Rebecca Shaw's office at 8:30 on Monday morning. The city was still waking beneath a ceiling of gray clouds. Delivery trucks blocked half the street, commuters hurried past with paper cups, and rainwater collected in the cracks between the pavement stones. Rebecca's office occupied the 3rd floor of a converted courthouse. There was no marble reception desk. No expensive artwork chosen to impress frightened clients. Just dark wooden shelves, old legal books, and a brass clock that ticked loudly enough to make silence feel deliberate. Rebecca had handled my father's estate 24 years earlier. She was younger then. So was I. Now her hair was almost entirely white, and a pair of reading glasses rested low on her nose as she studied the documents I had placed across her conference table. The forged power of attorney. The medical letter. The bank transfers. The penthouse purchase agreement. And finally, the ownership certificate from Hawthorne Residential Holdings. She read without interrupting me. That was one reason I trusted her. Most people listen only until they recognize the part where they are supposed to speak. Rebecca listened until there was nothing left to hide behind. When I finished, she removed her glasses. Does Daniel know you found these corporate documents? No. Does he know you still own an interest in Hawthorne? I don't think so. Margaret, you don't own an interest. She turned the ownership schedule toward me and tapped the figure beside my name. You own control. I had read the percentage several times during the night. 51%. But numbers can exist on paper without feeling real. Hearing Rebecca say the word control made the room seem colder. I thought my father sold most of his property holdings before he died. He sold several buildings. He did not sell Hawthorne. Then why haven't I received anything from it? You have. I frowned. No, I haven't. Rebecca opened another folder I had brought from the metal box. Your father structured the company to reinvest profits until the debt on its primary assets was paid down. Annual distributions were directed into a managed account. I don't have a managed account. You may have one you stopped monitoring. She leaned back. After your husband left, you asked my office to simplify the estate. You didn't want to deal with property meetings, tenant disputes, or quarterly statements. Your exact words were that you had a child to raise and no energy left for another responsibility. I remembered saying something like that. At the time, Daniel had been 9 years old and furious at the world. Most mornings began with an argument about school. Most evenings ended with me checking whether he was asleep before sitting alone at the kitchen table to pay bills. An inherited property company had felt less like an asset and more like another demand. So who has been running it? I asked. Professional management. A board of 5 directors oversees major decisions. And nobody contacted me? According to these records, notices were sent to a post office box registered by your former accountant. He retired years ago. Which may explain why you stopped receiving them. I looked at the documents. Could my ownership have been cancelled? Not without a transfer bearing your verified signature. The word signature hung between us. Rebecca glanced at the forged bank paperwork. We're going to confirm every share before assuming anything. I've already asked my clerk to retrieve the latest corporate filings. You already asked? I began while you were explaining the bank transfer. A faint smile touched her face. I can still listen and send an email at the same time. I almost smiled back. Almost. Then she became serious again. Now we need to discuss Daniel. I want my money returned. Of course. And I want the incapacity declaration removed from every record where he used it. We can begin both processes today. But there is something you need to understand. She folded her hands on the table. The bank may be responsible for failing to verify the documents properly. The clinic may be responsible if someone there produced a fraudulent medical letter. Daniel may face civil and criminal consequences. He deserves consequences. Yes. The certainty of her agreement unsettled me. She continued. But consequences are not theatrical, Margaret. They are slow. They involve investigators, hearings, handwriting analysis, subpoenas, and people questioning your mental capacity because your son made it part of the case. I looked toward the window. Below us, someone struggled to close an umbrella against the wind. I can prove I'm competent. I know you can. But you should be prepared for the insult of having to prove it. That was what Daniel had taken beyond the money. My presumption of competence. Until that week, I had been a woman managing her own life. Now strangers would examine whether I remembered dates, whether I misplaced objects, whether my voice sounded uncertain. A lie did not need to be believed forever to cause damage. Sometimes it only needed to be believed for one afternoon. What do you recommend? I asked. We notify the bank formally that the documents are fraudulent. We preserve every record. We request the original medical certification and transaction recordings. We alert the relevant authorities through counsel. You said consequences were slow. They are. And Daniel gets married while everyone investigates? Rebecca studied me. This isn't about the wedding. No. It was a lie. Part of it was about the wedding. Not the flowers or the ceremony. The wedding represented the moment Daniel intended to seal his theft inside a new life. Once he married Claire, the money would become entangled with joint property, shared debt, and promises made to someone who might not know the truth. Rebecca must have seen something in my face. What are you considering? She asked. I want to understand Hawthorne. Before reporting your son? While we report him properly. She was silent for several seconds. Those are not necessarily conflicting goals. Does Hawthorne own the Beaumont? We need to confirm the structure. And if it does? That depends on exactly what Daniel purchased. The answer arrived 40 minutes later. Rebecca's clerk entered carrying a printed corporate report and 2 property records. Her name was Nina. She was perhaps 27, with dark curls pinned carelessly above one ear and the focused expression of someone who enjoyed finding information other people assumed was buried. The Beaumont isn't a condominium, Nina said. She placed the records on the table. It's a cooperative ownership structure. I looked at Rebecca. In plain English? Rebecca pulled one document closer. Daniel did not purchase the apartment itself. He purchased shares assigned to Penthouse 31A. Those shares come with a proprietary lease granting him the right to occupy the unit. So he owns it? He owns an interest connected to it. But Hawthorne owns the building. And Hawthorne is his landlord? In practical and legal terms, yes. A strange stillness settled over me. The sentence from Saturday returned. This is my home. Daniel had said it with such confidence. As though confidence could rewrite the title records. Rebecca continued reading. The cooperative board approves purchasers, renovations, refinancing, and occupancy. Residents also pay monthly maintenance charges to Hawthorne. Who approved Daniel's purchase? Nina opened the next page. An expedited committee approval was issued 6 days ago. 6 days? That's unusually fast, Rebecca said. It gets more interesting. Nina pointed to the buyer's financial disclosure. Daniel claimed the down payment came from a family trust. I felt my jaw tighten. What family trust? He listed the source as an early inheritance. Rebecca's eyes met mine. That matters. Why? Because the board approved him based partly on his claimed assets and financial stability. If the funds were stolen rather than inherited, his occupancy approval may have been obtained through material misrepresentation. Can Hawthorne remove him? Potentially. But not because you're angry with him. I know that. I need to be certain you do. Rebecca's voice was firm. You may control Hawthorne, but you cannot use the company as a private weapon. You can enforce legitimate rules. You can investigate fraud affecting the building. You can participate in board decisions where permitted. But if you manufacture violations or interfere with essential services, Daniel could claim retaliation. I'm not interested in cutting off his water. Good. I'm interested in finding out how many lies he told to get into that building. Rebecca's expression softened. That, we can do. By noon, we had confirmed my shares. The process should have taken days. It took 3 hours because my father had been the kind of man who kept original documents in 3 different places and distrusted any system that required remembering a password. Hawthorne's corporate attorney joined us by video call. His name was Samuel Brooks. He looked tired before Rebecca explained why we were calling. Afterward, he looked alarmed. Mrs. Hale, we have been attempting to locate you for almost 2 years. Why? The company is preparing to refinance part of the Beaumont's commercial debt. Your approval is required for certain changes. Who has been voting my shares? No one. The board has operated around the restricted matters. And Daniel's purchase? That was approved by the admissions committee. It did not require a shareholder vote. Did anyone verify his claim that his deposit came from an inheritance? We reviewed bank confirmation of available funds. Did you review where those funds came from? A pause. No. Then you confirmed possession, not ownership. Samuel adjusted his glasses. That would be a fair distinction. Rebecca leaned toward the screen. Mr. Brooks, we need the full application file, communications with the broker, board minutes, and every document related to Penthouse 31A. We can provide them. We also need assurance that Mr. Hale will not be alerted until we understand whether company employees assisted in the misrepresentation. His eyebrows rose. You believe someone inside Hawthorne was involved? I believe speed usually has a reason. Samuel looked away from the camera, perhaps towards someone else in his office. There was pressure to approve the sale before the engagement event. From whom? The listing broker. Only the broker? Another pause. I'll review the communications. Rebecca's tone sharpened. Review them before you call anyone at the Beaumont. I understand. When the call ended, I realized my shoulders were aching. I had been sitting rigidly for hours. Rebecca poured water into 2 glasses. You need to eat. I'm not hungry. That stopped being a persuasive argument when we were 40. She pushed a plate of crackers toward me. I took one. Not because I wanted it. Because she was right. Revenge stories often skip ordinary human needs. They show people discovering betrayal, then moving immediately into action with perfect hair and a steady pulse. Real betrayal exhausts the body. My mouth was dry. My head hurt. I had slept less than 3 hours. Even anger requires blood sugar. The first truly unexpected discovery arrived that afternoon. Daniel's cooperative application contained a personal financial statement. He had listed his annual income as $240,000. To my knowledge, his consulting business had not earned half that amount in its best year. He listed an investment portfolio worth $600,000. He did not have one. He claimed he had no outstanding lawsuits. Rebecca found 2. He claimed the apartment would be his primary residence with Claire after their wedding. That part, at least, appeared true. Then Nina found the attached letter. It was addressed to the admissions committee and signed by Daniel. In it, he described himself as the future beneficiary of a substantial family property portfolio currently administered by my mother. I read the sentence twice. Then a third time. He had told the building I was managing his future wealth. The same mother he declared mentally incapable to the bank. Competent enough to administer a property portfolio when it made him appear rich. Incompetent enough to lose control of her savings when he wanted cash. He changed my condition depending on who was reading, I said. Rebecca nodded. To the bank, you were helpless. To the board, you were wealthy. Nina scrolled farther down the application. There's also an email from his broker. She read it aloud. Mr. Hale expects to receive control of the family company following his mother's transition into long-term care. The cracker in my hand broke. Neither woman spoke. Daniel had not merely told me to go to a home during an argument. He had already incorporated it into his financial plan. Long-term care. A polite phrase for removing me from my life. How far had he intended to take this? I asked. Rebecca closed the file. We don't know yet. He told them he would control Hawthorne. Yes. How would he do that? If he established you were legally incapacitated, he could attempt to gain guardianship or use a power of attorney to exercise your voting rights. The room seemed to tilt. The pension had not been the final target. It had been a test. A first transaction. If no one challenged the medical letter, Daniel could use the same fiction again. My bank accounts. My home. My shares. Perhaps everything. I thought of the soup he brought me. The way he had insisted I rest. The missed calls. His concern at the party. Did you take your medication today? Every gesture had been part of a larger picture. Not a sudden act of desperation. A campaign. Rebecca reached across the table. Margaret. I looked at her hand but did not take it. I raised him. The words came out quietly. You did. How does a child learn to do this? I don't know. I taught him to write his name. Rebecca's eyes lowered. And he used what I taught him to copy mine. For the first time since the grocery store, tears reached my eyes. Only 2. I wiped them away before they fell. Not because crying was weakness. Because I was not ready to give Daniel any more of my attention than he had already stolen. What happens now? I asked. Rebecca pushed a legal pad toward me. Now we stop him from acting on your behalf. By 5 o'clock, several things were in motion. A formal fraud notice had been delivered to the bank. The forged power of attorney was challenged. An emergency declaration revoking any prior authority granted to Daniel was filed. My physician had agreed to document my current cognitive health after an independent evaluation. Hawthorne's board had been instructed to freeze any attempt to transfer or exercise my shares. And Daniel's cooperative file was placed under confidential review. Nothing had been reversed yet. My account still contained $38. Daniel still occupied the penthouse. The wedding was still scheduled. But the direction had changed. That evening, Rebecca asked whether I wanted someone to drive me home. No. You're tired. Yes. That is not the same thing as being fine. I know. She walked with me to the elevator. Before the doors closed, she said, "Do not contact Daniel tonight." I won't. And if he contacts you? I'll save the message. She smiled faintly. You were always good at this. At what? Understanding that people reveal the most when they believe they're still in control. Daniel called at 7:15. I was sitting in my kitchen with a bowl of soup I had barely touched. His name lit the screen. I let it ring. A minute later, a message appeared. We need to talk about Saturday. Then another. Claire is upset because of what you said. A third message followed. You owe her an apology. I stared at the words. Not I owe you an explanation. Not are you safe? Not I will return the money. An apology to Claire. I turned the phone face down. 20 minutes later, someone knocked at my front door. Daniel stood beneath the porch light holding a paper bag. For one absurd moment, I thought he had brought soup again. Then I saw the logo of an expensive bakery Claire had mentioned at the party. He raised the bag when I opened the door. Peace offering. I'm not hungry. You don't have to eat it now. I didn't invite him inside. He noticed. Can we talk? We are talking. His eyes moved past me into the hallway. On the porch? It's where you are. A muscle shifted in his cheek. He lowered his voice. I'm sorry Saturday got heated. Is that what happened? We both said things. I accused you of fraud. You told me I belonged in an institution. I didn't say institution. No. You chose a kinder word. He exhaled. Claire's family is very private. They don't need to be dragged into our financial disagreements. Our financial disagreement? The money. My money. I know. It was the first time he had acknowledged it without qualification. I waited. He looked toward the neighboring houses. I made a mistake. A forged medical declaration is not a mistake. I panicked. For several weeks? I was under pressure. From Claire? No. From her family? No. Then from whom? He did not answer. A car passed slowly on the wet street. Daniel watched its headlights disappear. I needed the deposit immediately. There was another buyer. You could have let them buy it. You don't understand what this marriage means. What does it mean? He looked at me. Security. The word almost made me laugh. He had stolen my security to purchase his own. Claire's father can open doors for me, he continued. Real opportunities. Not the little contracts I've been chasing. Does Claire know that is why you're marrying her? His expression hardened. I love her. Those two things can both be true. He stepped closer. I'll repay you. When? After the wedding, things will settle. Money does not appear because people exchange rings. There are investments being discussed. What investments? I can't explain every detail. Because there are no details? His jaw tightened again. Then his tone changed. Softer. The voice he used when he wanted to be my son rather than my opponent. Mom, I know you're hurt. I said nothing. I should have talked to you. Yes. But if I had asked, you would have said no. Yes. He seemed genuinely frustrated by that answer. You weren't going to need all of it. There it was again. The belief beneath every excuse. That he had the right to calculate the value of my remaining life. How many years do you think I have left? I asked. His face shifted. What? You decided I would not need the money. So tell me how many years you allowed for. I didn't mean it that way. 5? Stop. 10? This is exactly what I'm talking about. You turn everything into some moral trial. You submitted a letter saying my mind was failing. I was going to correct it. When? After the loan closed. And before or after you took control of Hawthorne? The effect was immediate. His eyes widened. Only slightly. But enough. He knew the company. He knew exactly what it was. I felt the final piece slide into place. Daniel recovered quickly. Hawthorne? You mentioned it in your building application. His face became still. How did you see my application? I did not answer. Mom, how did you get it? You told the board I was preparing to enter long-term care. That was the broker's language. You signed the application. You're confused about what those documents mean. He had returned to the old tactic because it was the only weapon he understood. I watched him carefully. I spoke to the company's attorney today. The color left his face. Not gradually this time. Completely. What did you do? The fear in his voice was almost satisfying. That frightened me. Pain can turn cruelty attractive if you are not careful. I reminded myself that I did not want to become Daniel. I confirmed my ownership, I said. He stared at me. You sold those shares. No. Grandpa told Dad they were being liquidated. Some assets were sold. Hawthorne was not. That doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense. You simply built your plan on incomplete information. He set the bakery bag on the porch railing. You can't interfere with the apartment. I don't need to interfere. You don't control the board. I control 51% of the company that appoints it. He looked toward the street again. His breathing became shallow. In that moment, I understood how much of his confidence had depended on my ignorance. He had not thought I was powerless. He had worked to keep me unaware of the power I had. Listen to me, he said. The wedding is in less than 3 weeks. I know. If the board causes problems with the lease, Claire's family will assume I lied. You did lie. You're going to destroy my marriage over money you'll recover. You stole it. I said I'll pay it back. You also said I had dementia. His voice rose. I did what I had to do. The neighbor's porch light came on. Daniel noticed and lowered his voice again. You have no idea what it's like to be my age now. I was your age once. It was different. It always is. You had a stable job. A pension. A house you bought for nothing. I bought this house with a 27-year mortgage. That's not the point. It is exactly the point. You look at the result and erase the years required to build it. He pressed his palms against his face. For a second, he seemed exhausted rather than cruel. I can fix this, he said. Then return the money. I can't. Tell Claire. His hands dropped. No. Tell her before she marries you. She doesn't need to know. Then you are not trying to fix anything. You are trying to preserve the lie. His eyes changed. The softness vanished again. If you contact her, I'll tell everyone you're having an episode. The threat was quiet. Almost casual. That made it worse. You'll tell them I'm confused? I'll tell them you've become obsessed with controlling my life. And the forged documents? You can't prove I created them. For several seconds, neither of us moved. He had come to my home pretending to apologize. Instead, he had delivered a warning. Perhaps he believed it would frighten me into silence. It did frighten me. But fear does not always make a person retreat. Sometimes fear removes the last doubt. Good night, Daniel. I began closing the door. He stopped it with his hand. What are you planning? Move your hand. Answer me. I looked down at his fingers against the door. When he was little, those fingers had wrapped around mine whenever we crossed a street. I remembered cutting his nails while he slept. Holding ice against them when he caught one in a car door. Now he was using the same hand to keep me from closing my own front door. Daniel. My voice was quiet. Move your hand. Something in my expression reached him. He stepped back. I closed the door and turned the lock. Through the glass, I watched him remain on the porch for nearly a minute. The bakery bag sat untouched on the railing. Then he picked it up and walked away. The next morning, Hawthorne's board held an emergency meeting. I attended by video from Rebecca's office. 5 faces appeared across the screen. Samuel Brooks, the company attorney. Helen Price, the board president. 2 directors I had never met. And Martin Vale, the Beaumont's resident manager. Martin was a narrow-faced man in his late 50s with silver spectacles and a voice that seemed permanently irritated. Helen began formally. Mrs. Hale, before we discuss Penthouse 31A, I want to welcome you back to active participation in the company. I was unaware I had left. The directors exchanged uncomfortable glances. Samuel intervened. We'll separately address the failures in shareholder communication. Please do. Helen opened Daniel's file. The admissions committee approved Mr. Hale based on apparently false information regarding his assets, income, and expected inheritance. Apparently? I asked. We are still verifying. I can verify that his down payment was taken from my pension account without permission. Helen nodded. Your attorney provided the bank notice. Martin leaned toward his camera. Mr. Hale has also begun renovations that were not included in his alteration agreement. What renovations? Removal of an interior wall between the dining area and study. My surprise must have shown. I saw the apartment Saturday. The wall was already gone. The work appears to have begun before the lease officially commenced. Would that be allowed? No, Helen said. Structural alterations require engineering review and board approval. Who let the contractors inside? Martin's mouth tightened. The night supervisor. Why? We're investigating. Rebecca wrote something on the pad beside her. Helen continued. There are additional concerns. Mr. Hale hosted an event exceeding the building's guest limit. The rooftop terrace was used without proper reservation, and alcohol service continued beyond the permitted time. On their own, the violations sounded petty. Noise. Paperwork. The small rules people ignore when they assume rules are for someone else. Together, they showed a pattern. Daniel had entered the building believing permission would follow whatever he chose to do. Just as it had with my money. Can you evict him? I asked. Helen answered carefully. A proprietary lease may be terminated for fraud in the application or serious lease violations. But termination requires notice, an opportunity to respond, and a board vote. I want the process followed exactly. Martin seemed surprised. You don't want immediate action? I want lawful action. Rebecca glanced at me with approval. I also want a full inspection of the alterations, I continued. Not because he is my son. Because unauthorized structural work could affect every resident below him. Helen nodded. We can issue 48 hours notice. I'd like to attend. Martin frowned. Shareholders do not ordinarily attend unit inspections. I'm not asking to wander through his bedroom. I want to understand the property I own. Samuel spoke. With the resident's consent, or in an official board observer capacity, it may be possible. He will not consent. Then we document the limited purpose carefully. Rebecca leaned toward her microphone. Mrs. Hale should not participate in enforcement decisions arising solely from personal disputes. But given her controlling interest and the potential company liability, observing the structural inspection is defensible. Helen looked across the screen. Are there objections? Martin hesitated. Then shook his head. No objection. The inspection was scheduled for Thursday morning. A formal notice was delivered to penthouse 31A before noon. At 12:15, Daniel called me. I did not answer. At 12:16, he called again. Then again. By 1 o'clock, I had 7 missed calls and 4 messages. You have no right to enter my home. This is harassment. You're proving everything I told Claire about you. The final message was different. Please don't do this. I read that one longer than the others. Not because it changed my mind. Because it was the first honest thing he had said. He was afraid. Thursday morning arrived clear and painfully bright. The Beaumont's lobby smelled of polished wood and white lilies. Sunlight reflected from the brass elevator doors. Residents crossed the marble floor carrying small dogs, gym bags, and cups from the cafe beside the concierge desk. I wore a charcoal coat and carried no briefcase. Rebecca had advised me to bring only a notebook. Your purpose is observation, she reminded me as we entered the elevator. I know. Do not argue with him. I know. Do not discuss the stolen funds in front of building employees unless necessary. I know. She looked at me. You've said that 3 times. Perhaps Daniel was right. I repeat myself. Rebecca did not laugh. Neither did I. Martin Vale accompanied us with the building engineer and a security officer. When the penthouse doors opened, Daniel was waiting. He wore dark trousers and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He had not shaved. For the first time in years, he looked younger than his age. Not innocent. Unprepared. Claire stood several feet behind him. She wore a cream sweater and no makeup. Her eyes were swollen, as though she had been crying or sleeping badly. Her gaze moved to me. Then to Rebecca. Why is she here? Daniel asked. Martin held up the inspection notice. Mrs. Hale is attending as a representative of Hawthorne Residential Holdings. She's my mother. Those facts are not mutually exclusive, Rebecca said. Daniel looked at the security officer. This is intimidation. Martin remained calm. This is a scheduled inspection concerning unauthorized alterations. You may contact your attorney at any time. I already have. Then I'm sure your attorney explained the access provision in your lease. Daniel stepped aside. The victory, if it was won, felt empty. No music played inside the penthouse. No waiters moved through the rooms. The white orchids from the engagement party had begun to brown around the edges. Half-empty bottles stood on a side table. A silver balloon had collapsed near the ceiling, its ribbon drifting whenever the ventilation turned on. Celebrations age quickly when no one cleans up afterward. The engineer walked toward the missing wall. He photographed the exposed ceiling line, examined the flooring, and used a small device to locate electrical wiring. Who performed the work? He asked. Daniel folded his arms. A licensed contractor. Name? I'll send it. Was the electrical circuit relocated? I don't know. Was fire suppression altered? I said I don't know. The engineer looked toward Martin. We'll need the contractor records immediately. Claire stood near the windows, watching Daniel. Not me. That mattered. She was no longer searching my face to decide whether I was confused. She was searching his to determine what else he had hidden. I walked only where Martin directed. The penthouse was even more extravagant in daylight. A dining table large enough for 12. Artwork still bearing gallery labels. Unopened boxes from luxury stores. A coffee machine that probably cost more than my first car. On the kitchen counter lay a folder marked wedding payments. I did not touch it. but Claire noticed me seeing it. So, she said quietly, you really own the company? Daniel turned. Claire, don't. I asked her. I looked at her. My family owns the controlling shares. Daniel said those properties were his inheritance. They are not. He stepped between us. This has nothing to do with the inspection. Claire's voice sharpened. It has everything to do with why they're inspecting us. Not now. When? He stared at her. She continued. After the wedding? After your investors arrive? After my father signs something? The engineer stopped working for half a second. Then politely resumed. Daniel lowered his voice. We'll discuss this privately. Claire laughed once. There was no humor in it. You declared your mother incompetent. His face tightened. She told you that? You told me she was confused. You didn't tell me you used a doctor's letter to take her money. I didn't take it. I looked at him. Even then. Even with the bank records, the forged documents, and everyone standing inside the thing he bought. He could not make himself say the sentence. Claire moved closer. Whose money paid the deposit? Daniel did not answer. Daniel. It was temporary. Her face changed. Not dramatically. Something simply closed behind her eyes. You told me it came from an inheritance. It will eventually. The cruelty of that sentence silenced the room. Eventually. After my death. Or after he had legally removed me from my own affairs. Claire looked at me. I didn't know. Daniel scoffed. Don't apologize to her. That's what she wants. I felt something inside me loosen. Not forgiveness. Clarity. Claire may have enjoyed the penthouse. She may have been attracted to the wealth Daniel pretended to possess. But she had not signed the medical letter. She had not copied my name. She had been invited into a lie carefully designed for her. Mrs. Hale, the engineer said, breaking the silence, could I speak with you and Mr. Vale? We moved toward the far end of the room. He showed us photographs on his tablet. The removed wall wasn't load-bearing, but the contractors cut through part of a fire-rated barrier and relocated wiring without proper shielding. Is it dangerous? I asked. Potentially. The unit may require partial restoration until approved plans are submitted. Can they remain here? Yes, if the affected area is isolated and corrected promptly. But the work must stop immediately. Martin began drafting a violation notice. Behind us, Daniel and Claire argued in whispers. I could not hear every word. Only fragments. Made me look like a fool. Trying to fix it. My father asked for statements. Then Claire walked toward the bedroom. A door closed. Daniel remained alone near the windows. He looked at me with open hatred. You're enjoying this. The accusation caught me off guard. I searched myself before answering. There was satisfaction in seeing his control weaken. I could not deny that. But enjoyment? No. Every consequence landing on him also landed somewhere inside me. I wish none of this had happened, I said. Then stop it. You can stop it. How? Tell the truth. Return what remains. Cooperate with the investigation. And lose everything? You already risked everything. For one mistake. I looked around the penthouse. The forged signature. I raised one finger. The false medical letter. A second. The bank transfer. A third. The false cooperative application. A fourth. The unauthorized construction. A fifth. At what number does it become a pattern? His eyes moved toward the employees. You always did this. Did what? Made lists of everything wrong with me. I made lists for work. You made them for me too. The anger in his voice was real. Beneath it was something older. Something I had perhaps never understood. You remember every failure, he said. Every business that went under. Every loan. Every time you had to help me. I remember helping because I loved you. You remember it because it made you necessary. The sentence struck harder than I expected. Maybe because some part of it contained a truth I did not want to examine. Had I rescued him because he needed me? Or because being needed made his distance easier to bear? A parent can be wrong without deserving betrayal. Both things can exist at once. I may have helped you too often, I said. He seemed surprised by the admission. I may have prevented you from learning what failure costs. For one moment, the room between us softened. Then he looked at the violation notice Martin was preparing. And this is your lesson? No. I met his eyes. This is the invoice. The inspection concluded at 11:20. Daniel was ordered to halt all construction, provide contractor records, and restore the fire barrier within 72 hours. The board also scheduled a formal hearing concerning his application. It was not an eviction. Not yet. But the penthouse no longer felt like the untouchable kingdom he had displayed at the party. As we entered the elevator, Claire called my name. She stood several feet from Daniel. Margaret. It was the first time she had addressed me without ceremony. Daniel's expression warned her not to continue. She ignored him. Could we speak sometime? He stepped forward. No. Claire looked at him. I wasn't asking you. The elevator doors began to close. I placed my hand between them. They reopened. I studied her face. There was anger there. Embarrassment. And fear. But beneath all three was calculation. I could not yet tell whether she wanted the truth or a safer version of the lie. Tomorrow, I said. The cafe in the Beaumont lobby. 10 o'clock. Daniel shook his head. Claire, absolutely not. She did not look at him. I'll be there. The doors closed. As the elevator descended, Rebecca turned toward me. Be careful. I will. She may be innocent. I know. She may also be protecting herself. I know that too. What will you tell her? The truth. All of it? I thought of Daniel's false income. The invented investment portfolio. The claim that he would inherit Hawthorne. And Claire's unfinished sentence during the argument. My father asked for statements. I'll tell her enough to see what she does next. That afternoon, Hawthorne's attorney forwarded a new set of emails. Daniel had not simply used the penthouse to impress Claire. He had used it as evidence of wealth while negotiating an investment with her father. A proposed investment worth $4 million. Daniel's contribution was listed as access to the Hale family real estate portfolio. My company. My father's company. The assets he planned to control after placing me in long-term care. The wedding was not only a wedding. It was a deadline. Once Daniel became Claire's husband, he expected her father to sign the investment agreement. After that, he would have access to money large enough to cover the stolen pension before anyone noticed. That was his plan. Not to return what he had taken because he regretted it. To steal enough credibility to borrow enough money to conceal the first theft. Rebecca read the final email and leaned back. He's building debt on top of fraud. Can Claire's father lose money? If he signs, potentially. Does he know where Daniel's contribution comes from? Based on these communications, no. My phone vibrated. A message from an unfamiliar number appeared. This is Claire. Please don't mention our meeting to Daniel. There is something else you need to know. I showed it to Rebecca. What do you think it is? I asked. She handed the phone back. I think your son is not the only person who has been keeping secrets. The next morning, I entered the Beaumont Cafe at 9:50. Claire was already waiting in a corner booth. She wore dark glasses and held a sealed envelope against the table with both hands. No engagement ring. I noticed that immediately. She removed her glasses when I sat down. I need you to understand something, she said. I did not know he took your pension. I believe you. She blinked. You do? I believe you did not know that specific fact. Her mouth tightened. That's not the same thing. No. A server approached. Claire waited until we had ordered coffee. Then she pushed the envelope toward me. Daniel told me you were wealthy but unstable. He said you had begun giving money away to strangers and forgetting where it went. My hands remained in my lap. What is in the envelope? Copies of documents he asked me to witness. What documents? He said they were for estate planning. I opened the envelope. The first page was a petition seeking emergency guardianship over me. The second authorized the sale of my home to cover long-term care expenses. The third transferred voting authority over my Hawthorne shares to Daniel. None had been filed. Not yet. At the bottom of the final page was a blank signature line. My signature line. Beside it, in pencil, someone had practiced the first curve of my name. Claire watched me read. He said you had already agreed, she whispered. He said your attorney would complete everything after the wedding. I looked through the cafe window toward the river. People walked past carrying shopping bags. A bus stopped at the corner. A woman laughed into her phone. The world remained ordinary. That was what made the moment unbearable. Daniel had not been planning to steal one account. He had been planning to inherit me while I was still alive. Claire reached across the table but stopped before touching my hand. There's more. I looked at her. What more? She swallowed. The doctor who signed the incapacity letter. Her voice dropped. He's coming to the wedding. Because Daniel had already taken enough private information and converted it into leverage. Claire continued. He would bring up things I had told him in confidence whenever I questioned him. He never said, do what I want or I'll expose you. He didn't have to. That is still a threat. I know that now. A server placed our coffee on the table. Neither of us touched it. Why are you helping me? I asked. Claire took a breath. At first, I wanted proof that you were lying. That is honest. I thought you were trying to ruin the wedding because you couldn't accept that Daniel had chosen someone. Did he tell you that? He said you had always resented women in his life. I almost smiled. Daniel's serious relationships had lasted 4 months, 6 months, and once nearly a year. I had met only 2 of those women. One still sent me a Christmas card. What changed your mind? I asked. The inspection. The apartment? The way he spoke to you. Her expression tightened. He kept saying you were confused, but every time you mentioned a document, he knew exactly which one you meant. That was the problem with elaborate lies. Eventually, the liar knew too much. Claire slid her coffee aside. I went through Daniel's office after the inspection. Did he know? No. What did you find? Copies of your bank statements. Photographs of your medication. Notes about your daily routine. My stomach tightened. What kind of notes? When you went to the grocery store. When you attended church. Which days you worked in the garden. The name of your doctor. She hesitated. And a list of care facilities. The cafe seemed suddenly too warm. Facilities near my house? One was near your house. 2 were in other counties. Why other counties? I don't know. But I did. Distance. If Daniel placed me far enough away, the people who knew me would not see what was happening. My neighbors would assume I had moved for medical care. Friends would be told I was too unwell for visits. Letters could be redirected. Calls could be controlled. A person did not need to disappear physically to be removed from her own life. She only needed someone convincing enough to speak on her behalf. Where are the notes now? I asked. I photographed everything. Do you still have the photographs? She unlocked her phone but did not hand it to me. I'll send them to your attorney. Not to me? If Daniel searches my messages, I don't want your number connected to them. She was learning. Or perhaps she had always been observant, and Daniel's charm had simply given her reasons to doubt what she saw. Send them to Rebecca Shaw, I said. I'll give you her secure address. Claire nodded. I closed the guardianship petition and returned it to the envelope. Do not confront Dr. Mercer. I wasn't planning to. Do not warn Daniel that you gave me these documents. I won't. Are you still planning to marry him? Her face became still. I don't know. That is not a question I can answer for you. I thought you would tell me to leave him. You would expect me to. Yes. So would Daniel. She looked at me carefully. If I tell you what to do, he can say I manipulated you. Make your own decision. But make it after you know who you are marrying. She looked through the window toward the Beaumont entrance. He says he loves me. He may believe he does. That doesn't make sense. It will someday. Love was not always the opposite of exploitation. Some people loved others the way they loved a beautiful house. They wanted to possess it. Display it. Use it to tell the world something flattering about themselves. That did not mean the feeling was false. It meant the feeling was not enough. Claire rose to leave. Before she stepped away, she placed her palm over the envelope. One more thing. I waited. Daniel changed the wedding venue 3 weeks ago. I thought it had always been at the Halcyon. No. My family wanted the Northbridge Club. Daniel insisted on the Halcyon after he found out Hawthorne owned it. My pulse slowed. You're certain? He said it would prove he had influence over the family portfolio. The Halcyon Hotel. I had seen the name in the Hawthorne property schedule, but I had focused on the Beaumont. The company did not merely manage the wedding venue. It owned the building. Daniel had chosen a ballroom belonging to the mother he intended to declare incompetent. He had planned to stand beneath my roof and present my assets as his inheritance. Does he know I still control Hawthorne? Claire asked. He does now. Then why hasn't he changed the venue? The deposits are probably non-refundable. That wouldn't stop him. What would? She looked at me. Changing it would make my father ask why. Rebecca was waiting when I returned to her office. Nina had spread printed photographs across the conference table. My house. My medication cabinet. My weekly calendar. A photograph of me leaving the grocery store. Another of me carrying soil from my car to the garden. The images were not professional surveillance. Most appeared to have been taken with a phone from across the street. That made them more disturbing. Daniel had stood near my home and watched me. Or he had paid someone else to do it. In the center of the table was a handwritten list. Possible indicators. Repeats questions. Forgets names. Leaves stove on. Misses appointments. Gives away money. Becomes suspicious. None of those things described me. They described the woman Daniel intended to create. He was preparing allegations, Rebecca said. Could he have used these notes in court? He could have tried. Would they have worked? Not alone. But combined with a physician's letter, a forged power of attorney, and testimony from a close relative, they might have been enough for temporary emergency authority. Temporary would have been enough. Rebecca nodded. With temporary authority, he could have attempted to move you, restrict access, and control financial decisions while the court reviewed the case. How quickly? In an alleged emergency, very quickly. I sat at the table. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine the plan succeeding. Daniel arriving one morning with a concerned expression. The doctor who signed the incapacity letter. Claire's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. He's coming to the wedding. For several seconds, I heard nothing except the hiss of the espresso machine behind the counter. Who is he? Dr. Adrian Mercer. The name appeared on the letter from the bank. I had read it so many times that I could picture the signature beneath it. Sharp A. Wide M. A final line that dragged downward, as though the pen had become too heavy. How does Daniel know him? They met through a private investment group, Claire said. Adrian has a medical practice, but he also invests in property developments. Did he ever examine me? I don't know. He didn't. Claire lowered her eyes. Daniel said you had spoken to him through a telehealth consultation. I have never spoken to him. She looked toward the cafe entrance before leaning closer. There's something else. I waited. Adrian invested in one of Daniel's businesses last year. The company failed. How much did he lose? Almost $200,000. And Daniel owes him? Not officially. The investment document said Adrian accepted the risk. But unofficially? Daniel promised to make him whole after my father invested in the new development. The structure was becoming clearer. Daniel needed my pension to purchase the penthouse. He needed the penthouse to look wealthy. He needed the appearance of wealth to secure Claire's father's investment. And he needed that investment to repay the people whose trust he had already exhausted. Each lie was holding up another lie. Remove one, and everything collapsed. Why would a licensed physician risk his career for Daniel? I asked. Claire looked uncomfortable. I heard them arguing last month. Daniel reminded him that the investment group would discover he had used patient money. I stared at her. Patient money? I don't know exactly what he meant. Adrian said the funds came from an account he wasn't supposed to touch. Did Daniel record the conversation? I think so. Why? Because he records people when he thinks they might become a problem. The answer came too quickly. Not as a guess. As experience. I studied her face. Has he recorded you? She looked down at her bare ring finger. Yes. What did he threaten you with? He didn't threaten me directly. Not yet. Her eyes lifted. There was shame in them now. My father has been preparing me to take a larger role in his company. Daniel knows there are disagreements within our family. Private disagreements. About the business? And about my brother. I didn't ask for details. Not because I wasn't curious. A private ambulance or hired car waiting outside. A document stating that I had become a danger to myself. He would say it was temporary. Just until the doctors understood what was happening. He would pack a small bag. He would leave behind the photographs, the jewelry, the files, and the keys. Then he would speak for me. The world is surprisingly willing to ignore an older woman when a younger relative says she is confused. What do we do about Mercer? I asked. Rebecca looked toward Nina. We have confirmed he is licensed. We have also confirmed that his letter does not meet the usual standard for a formal capacity assessment. Meaning? It contains no examination date, no cognitive testing, and no explanation of how he reached his conclusion. Then why did the bank accept it? That remains an important question. Nina opened a separate folder. Dr. Mercer's clinic has also been under financial pressure. 2 liens were filed against the practice this year. So Claire may be right about the money. Possibly, Rebecca said. But we cannot accuse him without evidence. He will be at the wedding. I heard. Can we question him there? No. Her answer was immediate. A wedding is not a deposition. I wasn't suggesting we drag him onto the dance floor. I know that expression, Margaret. What expression? The one you wore when an employee tried to hide an overpayment in the county accounts. I recovered that money. You also made 3 supervisors cry. They had approved the invoices. Rebecca almost smiled. Then she became serious. We handle Mercer properly. We send a preservation notice today. We request his records concerning you. We notify the medical licensing authority that a capacity letter may have been created without an examination. Will he know before the wedding? Almost certainly. Then Daniel will know. Yes. I looked at the photographs. Good. Rebecca studied me. You want him frightened. I want him uncertain. There is a difference? Fear makes people retreat. Uncertainty makes them reveal what they were planning. Dr. Mercer received the preservation notice that afternoon. At 6:20, Daniel called. At 6:22, he called again. At 6:30, he left a voicemail. Mom, whatever you think you're doing, you need to stop contacting people connected to the wedding. Adrian has nothing to do with our family dispute. You're harassing my friends, and I'm documenting everything. I listened twice. Not for the words. For the sounds behind them. A car indicator clicked. A horn sounded in the distance. He was driving. His voice was controlled, but his breathing was not. At 7:10, another message arrived. We can still resolve this privately. Then, I can transfer $50,000 this week. That was the first time he offered a specific amount. Rebecca told me not to respond. At 9, Claire sent a photograph. Daniel and Dr. Mercer were meeting in the corner of a hotel bar. The message beneath it read. He told me he was meeting his attorney. By midnight, Rebecca had arranged for an investigator to obtain the hotel's security footage through proper legal channels if it became necessary. No one followed Daniel. No one planted a recording device. There was no need to invent evidence when frightened people were generating their own. The next morning, Dr. Mercer's attorney called Rebecca. He claimed the medical letter had been based on information supplied by Daniel. He claimed he believed Daniel held a valid power of attorney. He claimed there had been a brief remote consultation. With whom? I asked when Rebecca summarized the call. He says he spoke to you. He did not. He says the camera was disabled because you were embarrassed about your appearance. Convenient. He says you answered basic questions incorrectly. Which questions? He has not provided that information. Was the call recorded? He says no. Does he have appointment notes? His attorney says records are being assembled. I looked at Rebecca. He's trying to build the examination after the letter. That is my concern. Can he fabricate notes? He can attempt to. But electronic records have timestamps. Usually. And phone records will show what number he called. Yes. A slow calm settled over me. Daniel had needed too many people to cooperate. The banker. The broker. The doctor. The building committee. Each person had accepted one small piece of his story. Now each would protect themselves by explaining where that piece came from. And every explanation led back to him. Send Mercer's attorney a copy of my phone records, I said. We'll obtain certified records rather than using yours. Even better. Rebecca closed the folder. There is another issue. What? Daniel has retained counsel. I assumed he would. His attorney contacted Hawthorne and accused you of using corporate authority to conduct a personal vendetta. Did he mention the false application? No. Or the stolen deposit? No. Then he wrote a very selective letter. That is what attorneys are paid to do. What did Hawthorne say? The board will proceed with the hearing. You will not vote. I felt a flash of irritation. I own the company. And you are also the complainant's mother. Abstaining protects the decision from appearing personal. Will the other directors act? They have the documents. That had to be enough. Real authority was not forcing every result yourself. Sometimes it was building a process strong enough to continue without your hand on it. When is the hearing? The day before the wedding. I stared at her. Daniel will ask for a delay. He already has. Was it granted? No. The week before the hearing moved strangely. Some hours passed in a blur of documents and legal calls. Others seemed to stop completely. I continued buying groceries. Watering the garden. Folding laundry. Small routines became evidence that I still belonged to myself. On Wednesday, I completed an independent cognitive evaluation. The neurologist asked me to remember 5 words. River. Velvet. Church. Lemon. Key. He asked me to draw a clock. Subtract 7 repeatedly from 100. Name as many animals as possible in 1 minute. I answered calmly. But beneath each question, I heard Daniel's voice. You forget things. You repeat yourself. Maybe it's time we found you a home. At the end, the neurologist placed his pen down. Mrs. Hale, your results show no indication of cognitive impairment. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt angry. I had known the answer before entering the room. The test had not restored anything. It had merely provided paperwork proving a truth that should never have been removed. Can you state clearly that I am capable of managing my affairs? I asked. Yes. And that there is no medical reason for another person to control my finances? Yes. He hesitated. I'm sorry you've been placed in this position. Thank you. I collected my coat. At the door, he said, for what it's worth, Many people become anxious during these assessments and perform below their normal ability. I turned. What are you telling me? That someone who wanted you to fail might have created enough stress to make the result less clear. I thought of Daniel arriving before an examination, speaking over me, correcting me, insisting I was confused. Even a competent woman could stumble after being repeatedly told she could not trust her own mind. Then I'm glad I came alone, I said. On Thursday, Claire's father requested a meeting. His name was Edward Whitmore. He chose Rebecca's office rather than the Beaumont or his company headquarters. He arrived without Claire. Edward was 62, tall, silver-haired, and accustomed to rooms becoming orderly when he entered them. He did not waste time with introductions. Did your son steal the down payment? Yes. Is the family property portfolio his? No. Will he inherit Hawthorne? Not automatically. Did he have authority to offer access to its assets in a business proposal? No. Edward's face remained controlled. Only his right hand moved, slowly closing around the arm of his chair. He provided financial statements. They were false. Are you certain? Rebecca slid copies of Daniel's cooperative application and bank fraud notice across the table. Edward read in silence. Claire had told me he rarely raised his voice. I understood why. He did not need volume to express anger. When he finished, he looked at me. Why did you wait to contact me? Because your daughter needed the opportunity to speak to you herself. She did. Then why are you asking me? I wanted to know whether your accounts matched hers. Do they? Yes. He placed the papers down. I was prepared to invest $4 million in Daniel's development. Prepared? The agreement has not been signed. When was it supposed to be signed? The morning after the wedding. Of course. A celebration. A new marriage. A family breakfast. Then a contract placed beside the coffee. Daniel understood that people trusted documents more easily when they were surrounded by flowers and relatives. Edward continued. I believed his company controlled access to several redevelopment sites through Hawthorne. It does not. He showed me internal property schedules. My attention sharpened. Which schedules? Edward opened a leather folder and removed a presentation. The cover displayed Daniel's consulting company logo. Inside were photographs of Hawthorne properties, projected revenue estimates, and confidential debt figures. I recognized several documents from the metal file box. But some of the figures were recent. How did he obtain this? I asked. Rebecca examined the pages. These are internal reports. Could the resident manager access them? I asked. Some of them, she said. Martinvale's narrow face came to mind. His irritation during the emergency board meeting. His reluctance to explain the expedited approval. Speed usually had a reason. What did Daniel promise you? Rebecca asked Edward. Preferential participation in the redevelopment of 3 Hawthorne properties. He had no authority to promise that. I understand that now. Edward's eyes remained on me. I am withdrawing the investment. That is your decision. I'm also postponing the wedding. I held his gaze. Is that Claire's decision? He looked displeased. She is my daughter. And an adult. You think she should marry him? No. The answer came easily. But if you make the decision for her, Daniel will tell her we joined together to control her. He will make himself the victim. Let her decide with the truth in front of her. Edward leaned back. You are remarkably restrained for someone whose son attempted to steal her company. I have not always felt restrained. What do you feel? The question surprised me. Not because it was too personal. Because he sounded genuinely interested in the answer. I feel as though I am watching a house burn, I said. And every time I try to save something, I discover my son started another fire in a different room. Edward looked down at the false investment proposal. I trusted him. So did I. That was the only comfort I could offer. Not that he had been foolish. That Daniel had practiced deception on the person who knew him longest. Hawthorne's internal review found the connection to Martin Vale that evening. Martin had provided Daniel with confidential property reports. He had also pressured the Beaumont Admissions Committee to approve the penthouse application within 48 hours. In exchange, Daniel had promised him a senior role in the proposed redevelopment company. Martin denied knowing the down payment was stolen. That part may have been true. He had not needed to know. He only needed to believe Daniel would soon control Hawthorne. The board suspended Martin pending investigation. The next morning, he provided every email and message exchanged with Daniel. Self-preservation moved faster than loyalty. One message was especially clear. Once my mother is placed, the voting authority transfers. Don't worry about the current board. Placed? Not cared for. Not treated. Placed? A word used for furniture. Or unwanted animals. Or mothers who stood between sons and property. The board hearing no longer concerned only a dishonest apartment application. It concerned an organized attempt to influence the company through false authority. Daniel's attorney requested another postponement. The board refused. The hearing took place on Friday afternoon at the Halcyon Hotel. Hawthorne used a private conference room on the second floor. One level below, hotel employees were preparing the ballroom for Daniel's wedding. White flowers arrived through the service entrance. Gold chairs were arranged in rows. A cake taller than some children was wheeled carefully into the kitchen. Celebration and consequence occupied the same building. I waited in a smaller room with Rebecca while the board questioned Daniel. I was not allowed inside for most of it. That was appropriate. The company needed to decide based on evidence, not the expression on my face. Through the wall, I occasionally heard his voice rise. I could not make out the words. Only the rhythm. Denial. Interruption. Indignation. The familiar music of a man discovering that confidence was not evidence. After nearly 2 hours, Helen Price entered the room. Her face was tired. The board has concluded the hearing. What did they decide? The proprietary lease will be terminated based on material misrepresentation, unauthorized construction, and conduct intended to compromise the company's governance. My chest tightened. When? He will receive formal notice tomorrow morning. The termination becomes effective in 30 days, subject to his right to seek judicial review. The wedding morning, I said. Helen nodded. We considered delaying service until Monday. Why didn't you? His attorney announced an intention to use the wedding weekend to complete financial agreements based on his claimed position in Hawthorne. The board believes immediate notice is necessary to prevent further reliance on false information. Did I influence the decision? You abstained from every vote. That wasn't my question. Helen understood. The evidence influenced the decision. I nodded. That mattered more than I expected. Daniel would say I evicted him. Perhaps everyone would. But the truth was simpler. He had entered the building through fraud. The building had shown him the door. What about Martin? I asked. His employment has been terminated. Helen paused. There is one more matter. The Halcyon's management received a request from Daniel this morning. What request? He wants the hotel to display his company's investment presentation during the reception. I felt cold. Using Hawthorne's properties? Yes. After the hearing? He appears to believe the board will not finalize its decision until next week. Rebecca looked at Helen. Do not allow the presentation. We won't. I thought of Edward Whitmore. The unsigned investment agreement. The guests Daniel had invited. Business people. Potential investors. People he intended to persuade while champagne softened their caution. Has the wedding contract been cancelled? I asked. No. Why not? The hotel has no contractual basis to cancel the ceremony. The couple has paid, and the event itself does not violate policy. Then let it continue. Rebecca turned toward me. Margaret. I'm not going to stop the wedding. Why not? Helen asked. Because stopping it would let Daniel tell everyone that I destroyed his marriage. I looked through the glass wall toward the ballroom corridor. Tomorrow, Claire will decide whether there is a marriage to destroy. That evening, Daniel came to my house one final time. He did not bring cake or soup. He did not pretend to apologize. He stood on the porch in a dark overcoat, his face drawn from lack of sleep. I know the board voted. I remained behind the partially open door. Your attorney informed you? He said they're terminating the lease. Yes. Withdraw your complaint. It was not my decision. Don't insult me. I abstained. You own the company. And yet 5 other adults examined the evidence and reached the same conclusion. He looked past me into the house. You've always wanted me back here. The statement confused me. What? You hated the penthouse because it proved I didn't need you. I hated how you paid for it. You could have given me the money. You did not ask. Because you would have said no. That does not turn theft into permission. He pressed his lips together. The porch light revealed small red veins in his eyes. Claire's father pulled the investment. I know. You contacted him. He contacted me. You poisoned him against me. You gave him false documents. I was going to make the project work. With assets you did not control. I would have controlled them. There it was. No denial now. When? I asked. He did not answer. After placing me in long-term care? His face hardened. You wouldn't have stayed there permanently. The honesty of it was almost worse than another lie. So you did intend to move me? Temporarily. Without my consent. You needed protection. From whom? He stared at me. Neither of us needed to answer. From him. You would have been comfortable, he said. I almost laughed. Comfort. A private room. Clean sheets. Meals at scheduled times. Perhaps even a garden. All I had to surrender was my name, my home, my money, and the right to say no. You planned to declare me incompetent, I said. I planned to stabilize everything. My life was stable. Mine wasn't. The sentence came out like a confession. For a moment, Daniel looked less like the man at the penthouse and more like the boy whose father had left. The boy who believed the ground could disappear without warning. You were drowning, I said. Yes. And instead of telling me, you pulled me into the water. You wouldn't understand. I understand more than you think. Then help me. The word almost broke me. Help. The word that had governed our relationship for 30 years. Help with tuition. Help with rent. Help with business loans. Help with explaining a failure. Help with cleaning up the damage. Every rescue had taught him that love arrived after consequence and removed it. What does help mean this time? I asked. Tell the board the application confusion was a family misunderstanding. Ask Edward to reconsider the investment. Tell Claire the medical documents were part of estate planning. You want me to adopt your lies. I want you to save my life. No. His face went still. I had refused him many things over the years. A motorcycle at 16. Money for a sports car at 23. Another loan after his second business failed. But I had never refused rescue when the consequences became real. No, he repeated. No. I'm your son. Yes. You're going to let them take everything? I am going to let the truth remain where you put it. His expression twisted. That sounds like something you practiced. I've had a difficult week. He stepped closer. You think moving into that penthouse will make you happy? I had never told him I planned to move there. The thought had existed only quietly, after Rebecca mentioned that the company could eventually reclaim the unit following the lease termination. How do you know what I'm planning? I asked. He realized his mistake. Claire told me. She doesn't know. His eyes shifted toward the street. Were you watching my meetings? No. Did Martin tell you? Martin is protecting himself now. I understood. Daniel had continued receiving information from somewhere inside Hawthorne. Not enough to save him. Enough to feed his suspicion. What else do you think you know? I asked. He shook his head. Tomorrow is my wedding. I know. I need you to stay away. The wedding is being held in my hotel. It is not your hotel. Hawthorne owns it. That doesn't mean you belong there. I looked at him for a long moment. When you were little, you used to ask me whether I would still love you if you did something terrible. His anger faltered. You don't remember that. I remember everything important. He looked away. I always told you yes, I continued. I would love you, but I would not pretend the terrible thing was good. What does that mean? It means I still love you. His eyes returned to mine. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, I will not protect you from what you did. He stood beneath the porch light for several seconds. Then his face closed. You'll regret this. I already do. That answer followed him down the steps. I woke before sunrise on the wedding morning. For a few seconds, I did not remember what day it was. Then I saw the cream-colored envelope on my dresser. Inside was my invitation. Heavy paper. Gold lettering. Daniel Hale and Claire Whitmore request the honor of your presence. Honor. It was strange how often people printed virtues on invitations that were absent from the event. I dressed slowly. Not in black. Black would have looked like mourning. Not in white. White would have looked like provocation. I chose a deep green dress with long sleeves and a structured collar. My mother's pearl brooch rested against the fabric. This time, I wore it. Not because the day was a celebration. Because the pearls belonged to me, and Daniel had already decided too many things I would no longer use. At 8:15, a process server delivered 3 sets of documents to Daniel's suite at the Halcyon. The first was the notice terminating his proprietary lease. The second was the civil complaint seeking recovery of the stolen funds, damages, and legal costs. The third was an emergency court order preventing him from transferring, borrowing against, or representing control over any Hawthorne asset. Rebecca did not serve criminal charges. Those were not ours to create. The bank's fraud unit and relevant authorities were already reviewing the evidence. At 8:32, Daniel called. I let the phone ring. At 8:35, he sent a message. You did this on purpose today. I replied for the first time in over a week. The documents were ready today. The date belongs to your choices, not mine. His answer came immediately. Stay away from the hotel. I placed the phone in my handbag. Then I left home. The Halcyon had been built in 1928. Its lobby ceiling was painted with pale clouds and small gold stars. Brass lamps glowed beside velvet chairs. The air smelled of lilies, polished wood, and coffee drifting from the breakfast room. Wedding guests moved through the lobby in bright dresses and dark suits. Some recognized me from the engagement party. Their smiles became uncertain. Perhaps Daniel had warned them that I was unstable. Perhaps he had told them I was cruel. A lie rarely disappears when exposed. It simply becomes quieter. Helen Price met me near the elevators. The ballroom manager has been informed that you are attending as a guest and as Hawthorne's controlling shareholder. I don't need special treatment. You may need protection. A security supervisor stood discreetly near the front desk. I don't want anyone removed unless there is a genuine safety issue. Understood. Is the investment presentation disabled? Yes. Has Dr. Mercer arrived? Helen glanced at a tablet. He checked in last night. And Daniel? In the groom's suite with his attorney. Claire? In the bridal suite. Has she made a decision? I wouldn't know. Neither would I. That uncertainty remained the one part of the day Daniel could not control. Claire asked to see me 20 minutes before the ceremony. Her bridal suite overlooked the river. White flowers covered the dressing table. 3 bridesmaids stood near the window, speaking in whispers. Claire sat before a mirror wearing her wedding gown. It was elegant and simple, with long sleeves and no visible jewelry except small diamond earrings. Her engagement ring lay on the table. She dismissed the bridesmaids. When we were alone, she turned toward me. My father wants me to leave. What do you want? I want to know whether Daniel can change. That is not the same question. Her eyes filled. I know. I sat in the chair across from her. On the floor between us stood a pair of white shoes she had not yet put on. He says you have always controlled him, she said. I have helped him too often. He says you sabotaged every relationship he had. I met 2 women he dated seriously. One still sends me Christmas cards. Despite herself, Claire smiled faintly. It disappeared quickly. He says the guardianship papers were only to protect the company if you became ill. He prepared them before any evidence of illness. He says the pension transfer was a loan. A loan requires consent. He says Dr. Mercer misunderstood him. Dr. Mercer signed a letter stating he examined me when he did not. She looked down at her hands. He has an answer for everything. Answers are not the same as truth. What would you do? The question sounded younger than she was. I would not marry a man while I was still investigating whether he planned to use me. She looked up. That is what you think? Yes. Not because he stole from you? That alone would be enough for me. But this is your decision. She rose and walked toward the window. Guests were entering the hotel below. My mother died when I was 19, she said. After that, my father made every decision for me. Schools. Work. Where I lived. Daniel was the first person who made me feel as though choosing him was an act of independence. I understood then why Edward's opposition might push her toward the wedding rather than away from it. Daniel had not only sold Claire an image of wealth. He had sold her rebellion. Leaving him can also be your choice, I said. She pressed her fingertips against the glass. If I walk out now, everyone will know. Yes. If I marry him, I could leave privately later. Yes. She turned. You're not going to tell me which humiliation is easier? No. Why? Because humiliation passes. A legal bond is harder to undo. A knock sounded at the door. Claire did not answer. The knock came again. Daniel's voice followed. Claire? Her whole body became still. Can I come in? She looked at me. I stood. This is your room, I said. She crossed to the door but did not open it. What do you want, Daniel? We need to talk before the ceremony. You've had months to talk. Please. The words sounded sincere through the door. That was Daniel's greatest gift. He could make sincerity exist for the length of a sentence. Claire opened the door 3 inches. He saw me over her shoulder. His expression changed instantly. What is she doing here? I asked her to come. Claire, she served me with a lawsuit this morning. I know. She's trying to destroy us. Claire's voice remained quiet. Did you forge her signature? His eyes moved toward me. This is not the place. Did you? I made a financial decision to protect our future. Did she agree? She would never have agreed because she doesn't understand risk. Did she agree? Daniel's jaw tightened. No. Claire closed her eyes briefly. He continued. But I was going to replace every dollar. With my father's money. With investment profits. From a deal based on properties you don't own. I was going to earn the authority. By putting your mother in a care facility? That was a contingency. Claire stepped back from the door as though the word had a physical smell. Daniel saw the movement. His voice softened. I love you. She began crying then. Not loudly. The tears simply moved down her face while she stared at him. I think you do, she said. Relief crossed his features. Then she continued. But I don't think your love makes anyone safe. The relief vanished. Claire. I need the room. The ceremony starts in 15 minutes. I know. Guests are waiting. I know. My entire life is downstairs. She looked at him. No, Daniel. Your audience is downstairs. Then she closed the door. He stood in the hallway. For several seconds, none of us moved. Finally, his voice came through the wood. You'll regret listening to her. Claire wiped her face. Leave. His footsteps faded. She turned toward me. I haven't decided what to do. You just made one decision. She looked at the closed door. Yes. The ceremony was delayed by 30 minutes. Guests whispered beneath the ballroom's painted ceiling. A string quartet played the same piece twice. At the front stood an arch of white flowers and greenery. Daniel waited beside it with his attorney seated in the first row. He had repaired his appearance. His tuxedo was perfect. His expression calm. From a distance, no one would have known that he had received an eviction notice and fraud lawsuit before breakfast. Dr. Mercer sat near the aisle. He was smaller than I expected. Late 50s. Dark suit. Restless hands. When he saw me, he looked away immediately. Edward Whitmore sat on the opposite side of the aisle, alone in the front row. I chose a seat several rows behind him. Not the groom's family seat. Daniel had removed my name from it. Perhaps he expected that to hurt me. It did. But grief had become familiar enough that it no longer controlled my posture. At 11:40, the ballroom doors opened. Everyone stood. Claire entered alone. No bridesmaids. No father beside her. She wore the gown, but she carried no bouquet. Her face was pale and composed. She walked halfway down the aisle. Then stopped. The musicians continued for 2 uncertain notes before falling silent. Daniel smiled at her. Not warmly. Encouragingly. As if prompting an actress who had forgotten her line. Claire looked around the ballroom. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice was not loud, but the silence carried it. "This ceremony will not continue today." A murmur moved through the guests. Daniel stepped forward. "Claire, come here." She did not move. I said I'm sorry to everyone who traveled and made plans. But I cannot enter a marriage while there are serious questions about fraud, financial deception, and documents used against a vulnerable person. "I am not vulnerable," I said quietly. Several people near me heard. Claire's eyes found mine. A faint understanding passed between us. Daniel descended from the platform. "This is private." Claire faced him. "You made it public when you invited investors." His composure fractured. "Your father did this." "No." He looked toward me. "She did." "No," Claire repeated. "You did." The room became completely still. Not everyone understood the details. They did not need to. The truth was visible in Daniel's face. He looked from Claire to Edward. Then toward Dr. Mercer. The doctor stood abruptly. "I should leave." Rebecca stepped into the aisle from the back of the ballroom. "You are free to leave, Dr. Mercer. Your attorney has already received the document preservation request." Every face turned toward him. Mercer froze. Daniel's eyes widened. "Adrian, don't say anything." That sentence did more damage than an accusation. Dr. Mercer stared at him. "You told me she had agreed." Daniel moved toward him. "This is not the time. You told me the consultation was only a formality." Guests began whispering. Mercer's fear had overtaken his caution. "You said you already had legal authority." Daniel lowered his voice, but the room was quiet enough to hear. "Stop talking." Mercer looked at me for the first time. "I never met you." The words landed softly. Their meaning did not. "I know," I said. "I was told you were refusing examination because of paranoia." "I was never contacted." His face collapsed slightly. "I relied on information supplied by your son." Daniel grabbed his arm. His attorney rushed forward. "Daniel, do not touch anyone. Do not speak." Mercer pulled away. Claire removed the engagement ring from the table beside the aisle. She must have carried it in her hand. She held it toward Daniel. He did not take it. So she placed it on the nearest chair. "I'm leaving," she said. "Claire, wait." "No. We can fix this." Her expression held a sadness deeper than anger. "That is what you say when you mean someone else will fix it." Then she walked toward the ballroom doors. Edward followed after a brief hesitation. Daniel remained in the aisle beneath hundreds of white flowers. For the first time, no one moved to rescue him. I did not take the microphone. I did not present a slideshow of bank records. I did not give a speech exposing every humiliating detail of my son's life. That might have satisfied the guests' curiosity. It would not have restored my money or my dignity. Instead, Helen instructed the hotel manager to end the event safely. The catering contract had already been paid. Food was donated to 2 local shelters and the hotel staff. Guests collected their coats and left in small, uncomfortable groups. Some avoided looking at me. Others offered apologies for things they had not done. One older woman squeezed my hand and said, "Children can break your heart in ways no one prepares you for." I believed she was speaking from experience. Daniel disappeared into the groom's suite with his attorney. Dr. Mercer left through a service corridor. Rebecca advised me not to follow either of them. I had no desire to. The grand confrontation was over. What remained would happen in offices, courtrooms, bank departments, and long nights when each of us faced what we had become. Real consequences rarely arrive with music. They arrive as letters. Deadlines. Cancelled accounts. Rooms that must be emptied. The bank restored temporary access to part of my funds within 2 weeks. Its internal review found multiple failures. The expired power of attorney had been accepted without proper verification. The medical letter had been treated as proof of authority even though it did not legally grant any. The verification call had been answered from a number connected to Daniel's consulting office, not mine. The bank reimbursed the stolen transfer while pursuing recovery through its insurers and legal action. $38 became $312,000 again. The number looked the same on the screen. It did not feel the same. Before, it had represented security. Now it represented evidence that security could be removed by someone who knew where you kept your documents. I changed banks. Changed passwords. Closed the post office box connected to my former accountant. Hired an independent financial advisor. And for the first time in decades, I attended every Hawthorne board meeting. Not because I trusted no one. Because absence had created a space Daniel believed he could occupy. Dr. Mercer surrendered his license temporarily while the medical board investigated. His records contained no legitimate consultation with me. The notes had been entered 3 days after Rebecca's preservation notice. The electronic timestamps made that clear. He claimed Daniel had pressured him by threatening to expose irregularities in his clinic accounts. That did not excuse the letter. But it explained the fear I had seen at the wedding. Martinvale cooperated with investigators and admitted providing Daniel with confidential company information in exchange for promised employment. He avoided some consequences by helping expose the broader scheme. Not all of them. Claire's father never signed the investment agreement. Several other potential investors withdrew after learning Daniel had misrepresented his connection to Hawthorne. His consulting company collapsed within a month. This time, I did not pay the rent. Daniel challenged the termination of his Beaumont lease. He claimed the board was controlled by a vindictive mother. The court reviewed the false financial statements, the stolen down payment, the unauthorized construction, and the messages concerning my voting authority. His request to block the termination was denied. 30 days after the wedding, movers carried his furniture through the Beaumont lobby. I did not attend. Helen asked whether I wanted the building to waive storage fees as a courtesy. No, I said. Then I reconsidered. Give him the same terms you would give any other resident. That became my rule. Not harsher because he was my son. Not softer either. Equal treatment felt colder than revenge. It was also cleaner. The civil case continued for months. Daniel eventually entered a settlement admitting he had transferred the funds without permission and submitted false documents. He agreed to repay legal costs and surrendered several assets purchased during the scheme. The bank and authorities handled the remaining fraud matters separately. He was not dragged away from the wedding in handcuffs. He did not vanish into prison the next morning. Life is rarely that tidy. He faced criminal charges related to the forged documents and fraudulent transfer. His attorney negotiated a resolution involving restitution, probation, strict financial monitoring, and community service. Some people believed the punishment was too lenient. Others believed I should have asked prosecutors to show mercy. They spoke as though I controlled every institution. I did not. My responsibility was simpler. Tell the truth. Preserve the evidence. Stop lying to protect him. For 3 months, Daniel did not contact me. Then a letter arrived. Not an email. Not a message sent at midnight. A handwritten letter. The first page contained explanations. Pressure. Fear. Debt. Claire's family. The need to prove himself. I nearly stopped reading. On the second page, the language changed. He wrote, I told myself I was borrowing from the future. The truth is, I treated your future as though it had less value than mine. I read that sentence several times. Then, I believed you would forgive me because you always had. I confused forgiveness with immunity. That sentence sounded like him. Not the version he presented to investors. Not the frightened boy. The man between them. He did not ask me to withdraw anything. He did not ask for money. At the end, he wrote, I don't expect you to trust me. I'm trying to understand why I believed loving you gave me the right to erase you. I placed the letter in the kitchen drawer. I did not answer immediately. Forgiveness is not a switch. It is not the same as reunion. And it does not require returning the key to someone who burned down the room. Claire moved out of the penthouse before the lease ended. She returned the ring. 6 months later, she sent me a photograph from a small office with her name on the door. She had left her father's company and started an advisory firm helping family businesses build safeguards against financial coercion and undisclosed conflicts. Her message was brief. You told me leaving could be my own decision. It finally is. We met for coffee occasionally. Not as almost family. Not quite as friends. As two women who had believed different versions of the same man and survived the cost of learning the truth. She never asked whether I would forgive Daniel. I never asked whether she still loved him. Some questions remain private because the answer does not change what must happen next. The Beaumont penthouse remained empty during the legal process. When Hawthorne finally regained possession, the board planned to sell the associated shares. I visited the unit alone before it was listed. The unauthorized wall had been restored. The orchids were gone. So were the champagne bottles, the artwork, and the furniture. Without them, the apartment looked less like a palace and more like a collection of empty rooms. I stood near the windows where Daniel had announced his future. The city stretched below me. Traffic moved across the bridge. Clouds cast slow shadows over the river. For years, I had imagined retirement as a smaller life. A quiet house. A careful budget. A garden I could manage without help. There was dignity in that dream. But it had also been built around disappearing. Taking up less space. Spending less. Needing less. Leaving enough behind that Daniel would never struggle. He had mistaken my carefulness for an admission that my life was nearly over. Perhaps I had made the same mistake. I asked the board not to sell the unit. Instead, I purchased its occupancy shares at an independently assessed value, with every conflict disclosed and every vote handled without me. I sold my old house 6 months later. Not because Daniel had tried to remove me from it. Because I chose to leave. That difference mattered. On my first evening in the penthouse, I ate tomato soup at the long dining table. The same soup I had removed from the grocery counter when my card declined. The apartment was not filled with expensive furniture. I brought my old armchair. My father's desk. The wooden box containing my mother's brooch. On the terrace, I planted tomatoes in large clay pots. The wind was stronger 31 floors above the city. I had to tie the stems carefully so they would not break. As the sun set, the windows turned gold. For a moment, I remembered Daniel at 9 years old, asleep on the sofa with toast crumbs on his shirt. I remembered his hand in mine. His college graduation. The first time he called me after his father left and asked whether I was coming home. Love did not disappear because trust did. That was the part no revenge story ever explains. You can close the door and still hear the child on the other side. You can demand justice and still grieve the person facing it. You can love someone deeply and refuse to let them destroy you. A year after the wedding, Daniel and I met in Rebecca's office. Neutral ground. He looked older. Not dramatically. The softness had simply left his face. He had found salaried work with a small logistics company. No title large enough to impress investors. No office with a view. He was attending financial counseling as part of his legal agreement. When he entered, he did not try to hug me. "Hi, Mom." "Hello, Daniel." We sat across from each other. Rebecca remained for the first 10 minutes, then left us alone after confirming that I was comfortable. Daniel looked around the room. "Do you remember when I spilled juice on that rug? You were 11. Rebecca said it was antique. She charged your father for cleaning." A small smile passed between us. Then vanished. "I got your letters," I said. "I didn't know if you read them." "I did." He folded his hands. "I'm not asking to come home." "I know." "I'm not asking for money." "I know." "I wanted to apologize without asking you to make me feel better." I waited. His eyes lowered. "I stole from you. I lied about your health. I tried to take control of your company and your house. I used things you told me as my mother to make other people doubt you." His voice trembled, but he continued. "I can explain why I was scared. I can explain the debt. I can explain how ashamed I was of failing. But none of that explains why I decided your freedom mattered less than my reputation." For the first time, he had named the real theft. Not the pension. Freedom. "I don't know whether I can forgive you," I said. He nodded. "I understand. I may forgive parts of it before others." "I understand. And even if I forgive you, you will never have access to my finances again." "I know. You will not vote my shares, manage my property, or make medical decisions for me." "I know. I will not lie to protect you." He looked at me. "I don't want you to." Perhaps he meant it. Perhaps he wanted to mean it. Trust begins with allowing uncertainty to remain. He reached into his coat and placed a small object on the table. My spare house key. The one I had given him 15 years earlier. I should have returned it sooner. I picked it up. The brass was scratched near the edge. A familiar key to a house I no longer owned. "I sold the house," I said. "I heard. It opens nothing now." He looked at it. "Maybe that's appropriate." I placed the key in my handbag. We spoke for another 20 minutes. Not about reconciliation. About work. His probation requirements. My garden on the terrace. Ordinary things. When the meeting ended, he stood near the door. Can I call you sometime? I considered the question. Once a month. His face showed a flicker of pain. Then gratitude. Once a month. It was not a second chance. Not yet. It was a boundary with a small door inside it. Whether that door opened wider would depend on what he did when no money, property, or audience was waiting on the other side. People often say blood is thicker than water. They use it to demand loyalty from the person who was hurt. They rarely say it to the person who caused the wound. Blood may connect us, but it does not purchase silence. It does not erase accountability. And it does not give anyone the right to spend another person's remaining years as though they were loose change. My son sold my pension to build a future he believed was more important than mine. He bought a penthouse in a building he thought he would inherit. Instead, he taught me something I should have understood long before retirement. A mother's love can be unconditional. Her access does not have to be. Today, I live in the home Daniel once used to prove he no longer needed me. The difference is, I no longer live here to prove anything. Every morning, I make coffee and step onto the terrace. I check the tomatoes. I watch the city wake beneath me. And sometimes, when the phone rings on the first Sunday of the month, I answer. Not because the past has been erased. Because the future belongs to me again. And now I want to ask you something. If your own child forged your name, took your savings, and tried to remove you from your life, could you ever give them another chance? Would you open the door slowly, with boundaries they had to earn? Or would you close it forever? Tell me honestly in the comments. And if this story reminded you that love should never require surrendering your dignity, share it with someone who may need that reminder. Because sometimes the strongest thing a mother can say is not, I forgive you. Sometimes it is simply, no more.